The topic of today's presentation is manager and director ratings. And we're going to show you the work we have done so far on this topic. I'm now going to pass you over to Simon, who is going to give you our thoughts on the whole research. And he's going to talk for approximately 20 minutes. Then in the last 10 minutes, we would like to take some questions. If you'd like to ask a question, please refer to the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type your question in. We'll try to answer your question at the end. Thank you for your attention, and now over to Simon.
And thank you, Olga. I'm very pleased that you can join us here today. As Olga just said, that we will be giving a presentation. I'll be doing that for approximately 20 minutes. And we'll allow approximately 10 minutes at the end for questions. And there may be, I hope there will be anyway, a fair number of questions today. If that is the case and we need to go past the half hour, we can go over a little bit. But let's just see how we get on. Right, the NED is building a data hub to provide the industry, the international asset management industry, I should say, with information on asset managers, fund boards, and their directors. We probably should have done this many years ago, but better late than never. Much of the information that we are collecting on fund directors comes from the SEC's form ADV, but which also, incidentally, in case you don't know, includes quite a lot of information on funds domiciled in Ireland and Luxembourg, as well as the BVI, Bermuda, and of course Cayman, and also to a certain extent Guernsey and Jersey as well. But we are also analysing the data from the CBI's ICAV register in Ireland, information from the CSSF's site in Luxembourg, the JFSC in Jersey, GFSC in Guernsey, etc., and of course the FCA here in the UK. We've done a lot of that over the last few years anyway, but we're now doing this in a much more systematic and comprehensive way than we've done it before. And so the NED is tracking fund board composition by manager and jurisdiction in order to allow managers to assess where they stand vis-a-vis their peers. What we're doing is building up a matrix of information on managers and directors for use by investors, managers and directors, particularly for fund board selectors. And the intention is to start effectively a benchmarking service and possible rankings of managers, fund board standards, which we're considering. This is not finalized, but we're certainly considering putting into a sort of 3-level of ranking. At the moment, we're thinking of calling it gold, silver, and a bronze ranking. We are going to be consulting with our subscribers. We've already just begun this, and today's event is part of that process, on exactly what should be included in the criteria for rating fund managers' boards composition. Particularly important we consider is use of independence. It's not just the fact of whether they use independence or not, but it's how they use independence. That's, in our view, incredibly important. Whether, for example, they use split boards, that's a term for those of you who may not know that's used heavily in Cayman. So that would be 2 different directors, not 2 directors from the same firm, directors from different firms or unconnected otherwise. Another important use of independence is the ratio of them to executives, professionals, and what we've termed, we just came up with this term the other day, occasionals. What's an occasional? An occasional, I didn't want to use the term amateur because that implies something else. An occasional is probably a very senior, well-qualified individual that has a full-time or a large job somewhere else in the business, but they do sit on the board as an independent as well. That does happen. It doesn't happen enough in my view, but it does happen. It's particularly prevalent amongst some of the more she upmarket UK hedge fund managers. And then, of course, we want to include local directors. Local directors we think are important, even if there isn't a director residency rule. We think that there probably should be a local director on the board in the jurisdiction where the fund is domiciled. Outside independence, Size of board we think should be included. We think the more the merrier, the bigger the board on the whole is better. Gender, next week we are doing something specifically through our publication, the briefing report on the governance standards of the industry, and we'll get more into that then. And of course, experience. Sometimes through the process we've got, and I'll come on and explain that in a second, that's quite easy to find. Sometimes it's not easy to find, but where it is easy to find, we think we should use it. Now, so far, we have looked at 50 or so. These are the 50 on these two slides of the largest or predominantly alternative managers in the business using the form ADV, and then researching the names who we find on the board, which is normally surprisingly easy to do via Google or LinkedIn, but it does take time. And Olga has spent a large chunk of the month of January basically doing that. This is the first time we've displayed the information of the research that she's been doing. We have looked at the boards of 885 funds or sub-funds, master funds, feeder funds, umbrella funds, call them what you like. We prefer the all-encompassing term of entity because it covers all sins. So of the 885 entities that we've looked at, 12% are domiciled in Ireland, 10% in Luxembourg, 68% in Cayman. The remaining 10% are mainly in Guernsey, the BVI, and Bermuda. So what conclusions have we had to date? Unsurprisingly, we have seen quite remarkable wide variety in standards. For example, the use of split boards is split pretty roughly evenly. There are firms that frequently go to the same director business. Fiduciary Britain saying Cayman, two from DMS, two from Khan, or whatever it may be, and those will be their two independents, and that's it. Others, roughly speaking, very roughly speaking, half will pick people from different firms or two independents that are not connected in any other way, which we think is preferable. And I think that's growing slightly, not fast, but it is growing. And another conclusion, which is extraordinarily obvious when you look at the data as we have, is that most asset managers do use the same directors for all fund entities in the same jurisdiction. There are some exceptions. I'm going to come up with one of those exceptions in a few minutes when I give you an example. But by and large, Manager X will pick the same independents for all their Cayman funds, and they may use a different set of directors for their Irish funds or for their Luxembourg funds, but they rarely ever change in Ireland, in Luxembourg, in Cayman. It just doesn't happen. It might happen occasionally in Ireland and Luxembourg, and certainly does happen in Guernsey and Jersey, but it really hardly ever, it does occasionally happen, but it hardly ever happens in Cayman. Size of board varies very considerably too. And a few, as I've already mentioned this term occasional, use occasionals, meaning senior, we think is a very good thing, really senior people as independents. Of course, there are really senior people who may be the CIO of the fund on the board too, but they're not obviously independent. But we're talking about independents who are senior people from firms other than the organization promoting the fund. So that we see it from time to time too. So the best 10 to date, these aren't in any particular order. They're not necessary areas at the top and Lansdowne at the bottom. It's just that out of the 50 or so we've analyzed, we would say if we were doing our above average, our average and below average, these guys here would be in the above average, and therefore we may well be calling it the gold standard. And these 10 aren't necessarily, we say they've got questions, we've got questions to raise, because it does look like their board composition in some respects is problematic, but there may be a reason for that. And so before we point the finger and say that they're substandard, they're bronze or whatever it may be, we need to give them an opportunity to explain why, for example, they don't think it's necessary to put any independents on their boards at all in say Luxembourg or Cayman or whatever it may be. I'm going to give 4 examples of why we picked the 10 that we have in the top category, and then I'm going to pick two examples on the upside and two on the downside. And we could do this for several others as well, but we haven't got the time to do it. So I thought I would just pick some of these random examples. And I'm going to mention the good guys. So Ares has 41 funds with boards in international jurisdictions, according to the SEC's Form ADV. 40 of them are in Cayman. One of them is in Luxembourg. There really is considerable use of different independent directors from different fiduciary companies, those being Maples, Ocarian, Astera, and TDO. There may be another one as well. And the majority of these funds have different directors on their boards. And there is a big changeover. It's not the same two, whether it's the same two from different firms or the same two from the same firm. That seems to not happen at all in the Ares example. There's also an extraordinarily large number of independents used. There are only 41 funds here. They use 21 different independent directors for a not particularly large number of funds, which is easily a record in the analysis that we've done to date, including some of the other managers that have over 100 funds that we've looked at. 20 of the 41 boards have at least one woman on them. The only thing that's slightly on the negative with this firm is their average board size is only 2.6. Another example on the upside is Marshall Wace. I'm picking another jurisdiction, so we don't want to make this all about Cayman. And Marshall Wace has 35 funds domiciled and recorded by the SEC in Ireland. They do use, in contrast to Ares, they do use the same independent directors on all 35 fund boards. But each of these independents really is independent. They are unconnected with the other board members. That's quite easy and obvious to see. And they're all impressive, experienced, well-known individuals, unconnected with each other. If I was an investor in any of their funds, I would feel that was giving me reassurance as an investor. One of their directors is resident in Cayman. The other ones are resident in Ireland. All the boards have one woman on them, and the average board size is 5. On the two examples on the downside, I'm not going to give the names. I'm not sufficiently confident, and I don't want to point fingers until we've really absolutely sure we've got to the bottom of it. But this is a very large global manager, and that is certain everyone following this webcast today will know who it is. It has 43 funds with boards recorded by the SEC in Luxembourg. None of these funds has any non-executive or independent. Non-executive, obviously different from independent, meaning somebody that might be the lawyer of the firm from a Luxembourg law firm. They don't even have that. They don't have any independence on their boards at all. They're all executives, including, interestingly enough, the person who's responsible for the fund distribution. And when you look at their board composition, it looks just like an internal management meeting attendee list. There may be a good reason for that, so I don't want to cast aspersions. On the upside, all their boards have 2 women, and the average board size is quite a large 7. The other example on the downside is one of the world's most famous and largest hedge fund managers from the US. Apologies. I picked another one. Well, I think the largest European manager, one of the largest, if not the largest European manager, again, would be known to everyone here. This particular manager has 25 funds with boards recorded by the SEC, all of which are in Cayman. None of these funds has any non-executive or independent on their boards at all. None of the boards have any women, and the average board size is also a measly 2.4. It may be because it is a continental European manager, and there's sometimes the governance or independent governance can be a bit of a cultural issue that potentially could be one of the reasons for it. I don't know, but we would certainly like to find out more about that. So, and some other quick observations. One well-known large UK manager scores well by all the metrics I outlined earlier, but has an independent that was reprimanded by CMA 2 years ago on a number of its boards, not all its boards, but a number of its boards. Now this, although Olga has been interrogating the data from the SEC just in the last few weeks, I'm conscious of the fact that this could be out of date, even though she's done it just this January. So that could have changed, and it just hasn't been updated on the SEC's Form ADV. And there's another one, which another very well-known large hedge fund manager that uses the same 2 independents on all 42 funds that it has, irrespective of jurisdiction, and they use a lot of different jurisdictions, particularly in the Caribbean. And one of these 2 independent directors was mentioned in the Paradise Papers and has been in a court case in BVI. Again, there may be, we're not necessarily pointing fingers at anyone necessarily, but these are things that our analysis has brought up. I'm now going to quickly change subject in the last few minutes before we get to questions to the NED's director ratings. This is the logo we're using for those people who are subscribers that are rated in the top echelon of being a green rated independent director. Why are we doing this? Basically to provide investors and managers with validation from an objective source, as we believe we are an objective source, we have no skin in the game, that a director is experienced, independent, and has sufficient capacity. And we like to think we know a lot about the business, and so we think we are in a reasonably good place to do that kind of analysis of a director's capability. And then the second reason for doing it, and probably this has been not said enough over the last few years, particularly with the rise of the large global governance firms in the recent past, is we think there is a need to promote the cause of capable and professional independence, and we would like to get behind doing that if we can. So on the director's ratings, I'm not going to go into it's been published several times in the NED. If anyone who's not a NED subscriber who would like that, just please contact us and that we will send you the information in more detail than I've got on the screen now. There are 3 categories. The top category, the green, is going to, or is already the NED's recommended list of directors, which when somebody asks us, and they occasionally do, I've got to call somebody with a lawyer next week in New York that I think may be using it. We will give them, we're not going to give them the full list, lock, stock and barrel, but he will say, presumably if he does, he wants 5 or 6 directors, candidates for his client. So we will hand over 5 or 6 names from our database that will fit that particular match that he is particularly looking for, provided that is from the green top rating. Quickly, the yellow and the red. Yellow is simply somebody who may lack in one of those areas. Quite often it's going to be independence, because maybe it's 1 or 2, not all, but it's 1 or 2 director firms that may serve on the boards of the funds as an independent, whereas colleagues of his or hers are doing service provider work for that fund, and it's not at all distinguished between that in any way at all. So that we think is lacking in independence, so we wouldn't put them into the green rating. And red is, as it says here, some previous sanctions, of which there are very few out there, or some serious conflicts of interest in some way or another. Selection Intelligence Service. This is something we have been launching late last year as well. That is for investors, managers, and then advisors who are looking for advice either on domicile selection or particularly on fund director selection. That's referencing my call next week I've already referred to. Anybody who is a subscriber, you don't have to be a selector, but anyone who is a subscriber is able to ask us for information from our director database. And as we build up the data we've been referring to today for managers, then we will very much be including that too. So if anyone wants information on a particular manager and what's on their boards, we will be able to provide that as well. Finally, this is the NED's 10th anniversary year, and we launched in September 10 years ago. Our objectives this year, the first is the biggest and the most ambitious, what I've been talking about this afternoon, provide the industry with what we hope is really objective, detailed analysis, which we think has been lacking on fund governance standards with benchmarking capabilities. We're now offering our subscribers Zoom interviews, which we will put up on our Ned site when we've made some changes to it before long, and then they can put it on their sites should they wish to do so as well. And we do online events now every month. The majority will be just for our subscribers. When we're doing a presentation type thing like today, that will be for everybody. But when we're doing more of a conversation thing, which we will be doing next month, that will be more for our subscribers. So that's it. I see Olga's returned. And I see, Olga, we have some questions. Perhaps I will stop sharing the screen and should we come to those questions?
Yeah. Okay. Are you ready for the first question? Should
Sure.
I start?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the first question is, will you publish your reports on managers in the NED?
Good question. We probably won't publish the full thing because once we get into the once we really get going, this is a bit like the vaccine rollout that we're doing in the UK and doubtless every other country too. We're still only at the over 80s, but we're moving down to the over 70s and over 60s, hopefully in the near future. But when we really get into the large numbers, it will just turn the NED into masses upon masses of pages of managers' reports. However, we will probably have a quick summary. We'll definitely publish, if we go with the gold standard, gold, silver, and bronze ratings, we'll absolutely 100% include that, and maybe a very quick summary of why manager X is in whichever category he or she may be in. So we'll do that. The full report, subscribers can contact us, Tamara Sims or you, Olga, or me, or somebody, and they can get that information and we will send that to them. We're not going to hold it back. It's not going to be kept in confidence, but we don't think it necessarily should be put up willy-nilly on our website or in the publication. Okay.
Okay. So I will move to the second question. How will your database of green-rated directors be used?
The green-rated director be used. Okay. By the way, something I didn't think I mentioned during the presentation, which is an important point on this. Anybody, you do not have to be a subscriber to be in that. We want everybody to be in it who meets the qualifications, but it's very much in our interest to have the widest, best qualified database, whether they're subscribers or not. However, if you're a subscriber, then you can use that logo I showed earlier, and you'll get the other promotional benefits, and you'll be kept up to date with the developments of it and what's going on. If you're not a subscriber, we absolutely, to repeat, want your information, but you wouldn't get those other things there. How will it be used? It's going to be used in the way I've already just mentioned. In other words, we're not going to hand it out lock, stock, and barrel. We are aware there are, some law firms have a list. Quite often, when we've seen it, it's been way out of date, of directors. So we want to use it in a more tailored, bespoke way. So we want people to contact us, and then we'll hand them over a number of names that meet their criteria from our database. Also, there were some people in Cayman who were quite nervous about this whole thing to begin with and didn't want to be on it if it wasn't going to be in confidence. So it's partly to respect their views as well. So we are going to keep the name. We're not going to publish the list anywhere on our website or put it in the publication. It'll be used in this sort of interrogation type fashion.
Okay, so we have two more questions as for now. The third question is, are you going to categorize fund boards by jurisdiction and strategy as well as by manager?
Interesting question, that is. Potentially, but probably not for a long time, because it would be quite a lot of extra work on top of what we have already committed to doing publicly, like today and in the NED. But it's a very good question when we should do that. I mean, certainly it's easier to aggregate the information by jurisdiction in terms of what we've got and make comparative judgments about, Guernsey and Jersey, Cayman, Ireland, Luxembourg, etc. Then I don't think would be too difficult. Doing it by fund strategy would be a very interesting exercise. I think it would be an awful lot of work we'd have to put in to do that. So I'm not thinking that's going to be any time in the foreseeable future. But it would absolutely be great to be able to slice and dice the stuff, not just by managers. One thing we will be doing, and I probably should have mentioned this in the presentation, is as we develop this from a variety of sources, to repeat, not just only the SEC, but for the other regulated sites and all the other things we're going to be doing as well. We are building up a lot of intelligence on the individual directors. And so we will may use that in different ways at different times as well. So I see more questions are coming in as I'm waffling on.
3 more.
Right.
We probably should move on to another one. Okay. The 4th question now. Do you see many opportunities for independent directors who are domiciled in the UK?
Yes, I see absolutely no reason why directors domiciled in the UK, you don't have to be domiciled in the jurisdiction where the fund is domiciled. So absolutely, yes, some of the best directors we know, really well qualified individuals, are based in the UK, and they're on the boards of funds in Cayman and in Ireland and other places. So absolutely, and the Channel Islands. So absolutely, yeah, of course, yes. There's no reason why not. I don't think there are any tax issues. There was some concern when COVID-19 came along about attending board meetings in particularly the Channel Islands, or not being able to attend them in this particular case, and whether that would raise a tax issue. But I don't think we had a discussion about that last year, one of our NED forums. I don't think that is a problem, was the conclusion.
Okay, so, can I move to another one?
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the disadvantage of a director being on more than a few funds of a client?
Well, first of all, I think it's a good idea that the more sets of eyes, the better. I think it is a good idea to mix people around. I think it's going to, if there's a potential problem, it's more likely it will be discovered that way. But as it happens, to repeat what I said in my presentation, it really happens very rarely that my example from Aries is not very common. It's really the same people, whether they're 2 people from different firms or whether it's 2 people from the same firm. It's pretty much always the same people every single time, especially in Cayman, but largely even in other jurisdictions too, including Ireland. So doesn't happen very often, but I do think it is a good idea to mix people around. I think it's going to give you an extra layer of oversight, although one could argue the other way, it gives you efficiencies if you're sitting on the boards of 50 funds or 50 sub-funds from the same promoter. But I'd be fighting a losing battle if I was trying to persuade people in Cayman, for example, to change that. It really never really ever happens. But when you get, and there are some situations where there's 70 or 80 sub-funds from the same promoter, I think some changes will probably be a good idea. Okay?
Yeah, and this will be the last one. Have you already seen industry inquiries to supply a list of rated directors?
Have we seen industry inquiries? We have been approached, or we are approaching, have been approached, we are in dialogues, probably a better way of putting it, with people who have asked us to give us the names, suggested names of people they could have approached for a particular board position. But I've been doing that on a very irregular, infrequent basis for many years. I wouldn't say 10 years, but since the NED's been going 10 years, but for several years, on a mates basis. People who know us, or people, friends of friends, might call us up and ask us for a few names, just like they might ask their local service provider for a few names. So we're trying to make that a little bit more systematic and a little bit more professional, something we've done, and make people aware, especially the New York law firms and the London law firms, that there is an independently verified and up-to-date list that's out there that they can use should they wish to do so. And there's no cost, there's no fee to them at all. But when under no illusions, it's going to take time to evolve and develop, but it's already begun to be used in this way at the moment. So yeah, I see there's a final comment from somebody who's already asked a question. Hello, Sean from Cayman. Yes, thank you. Yes, CIMA regulates directors in Cayman, and we had a story on the front page of December's NED that said CIMA had contacted all the directors in its database and for verification, and there was well over, I can't remember the number now, but there was well over 1,000 that didn't come back and risked getting struck off in the near future. I think from memory, CIMA was giving them until March to get back with the information they'd requested. So well done, CIMA, it's a good thing to do. And absolutely, yes, CIMA does regulate directors, so I didn't wish to imply that they do not. Gosh, I've been talking really quickly, and I think I've just got it through it all, including answering all the questions. And it's 2:30, which is the designated time of ending this, I think. So just want to say thank you very much for all of you for following us today. As Olga and I mentioned, next Thursday at the same time, we're doing something on ESG fund governance standards, and also ESG and some other, and service providers in ESG in some other ways as well. So I hope I hope you can join us for that, or at another of our events in the near future. Have a very good afternoon, or if you're in the Cayman or in the States, as I know some of you are, have a very good morning wherever you may be. Hopefully see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.